experience disappointment in our lives. It's an unavoidable fact of existence that eventually something will not meet your standards and will fail you. And of course, like a microcosm of the never-ending agony that is life on Earth, video games are no exception to this rule. Today I'm going to be listing off my top 10 greatest gaming disappointments. And when you really get down to it, this whole list is a chronological chart of my constantly escalating skepticism towards the games industry, from 2008 to right now. This list is a beat-by-beat monument to my ever-growing cynicism. The further down this list we go, the more painful it becomes. So strap the fuck in, folks. Let me be your guide as we descend into the deep, dark depths of disappointment. 10 years ago, in 2007, I experienced the first movie that I remember distinctly walking out of at the end and thinking, man, that really sucked. That movie was Spider-Man 3. It was a heavy realization for someone at the age of something, I don't want to do the math. That movie was the first piece of media that I really hyped myself up for, only to be fed a big shit sandwich. This was the fucking Spider-Man trilogy. How did it all go so wrong so fast? But little did baby Charlie know, this was only the beginning of his cynicism. 1 year after Spider-Man 3, my gaming disappointment cherry was popped by good old Spore. Oh, Spore, you could have been so much more. And it wasn't just me that was disappointed. I was young at the time, but if I remember correctly, Spore was basically hyped up as the gaming equivalent of the second coming of Jesus Christ. A universe simulator from gaming pioneer Will Wright, creator of the world-famous child cooking simulator series. But that's not what we got. On release, Spore felt like a shadow of what we were promised years before. The systems were surprisingly simple and regrettably repetitive as all hell. So once you played through the entirety of Spore once, there was no real impetus to go through the whole process again. 6 months into Spore, the only people left playing it were the ones who gleaned some entertainment out of the admittedly expansive creature creator, making Shrek or a bunch of weird penis monsters. Spore was my first real experience of getting run over by the hype train. It was impossible for that game to live up to the lofty standards that it set for itself. Kids these days have No Man's Sky. I had Spore. I love the original prototype, so much so that I made a whole video about it. In that video, I briefly mentioned that I'm not a fan of the sequel, but I didn't mention why because I was saving it for an upcoming video. The time is upon us, my friends. Let's talk about the many ways Prototype 2 sucks. First off, despite the fact that James Heller's power set has nearly unlimited potential for abstract, mind-boggling superpowers, Prototype 2 only adds one new power to the arsenal of the first game. One fucking power. The only reason I come to this series is to see what weird-ass shapes motherfuckers will turn their arms into next. And after 3 years of waiting, you give me one new power? Sure, it is an awesome power. Very few games allow me to implode people and create nightmarish flesh webs, but that shit was not worth the wait. Instead, they focused on giving you more guns to rip off tanks, which is just a goddamn waste of time and resources if you ask me. The stealth system was unimproved, the power set lacked creativity, the jump mechanic was changed and subsequently ruined, all of the zones required loading screens to get to as opposed to the seamless environment of the first game. It was just a mess. The only thing that took a sizable step forward was the quality of the graphics, which is never a good thing to say about a video game sequel. But what about that story, though? You'd think, as a game criticized mostly for its lackluster pacing and storytelling, that the sequel to Prototype would be shooting for the stars when establishing its new plotline and protagonist. I'm sure he's gonna be a compelling character with deep motivations, and no, he's just an angry stereotypical black guy.
You're gonna tell me, either on your own, or after I skull fuck you and drain your memories out the hole! Scary.
Should I be offended right now? I really feel like I should be offended. And yes, that stereotype rib is a bit of an unfair statement because James Heller is a better protagonist than Alex Mercer. But that's not really saying much. That's like being a better protagonist than a brick with some mascara smeared on it. James Heller, for the most part, is a constantly screaming testosterone and blood-fueled maniac. And it just feels like, was this written? Yeah, this was written by a white guy. And I distinctly remember, before Prototype 2 dropped, I read an interview with someone from Radical about James Heller as a protagonist, and I just feel like the world has to hear this interview. I'm gonna read it to you. We didn't seek out to start with an African-American protagonist. Maybe it's because we're Canadian. Where we live, it's a melting pot of different races. I'd like to think we're very colorblind.
The doctor is out, motherfucker!
I wish the entire world was colorblind.
How you like me now, you emo fuck?
I like to think our studio is... Because we have male, female, every race, religion, everything together. We're just a family.
Maybe you should have told me you had more of us running around. Not to mention some batshit insane mad scientist motherfucker.
We wrote a description of the... Fuck. We wrote a description of the character. We knew we wanted to set him apart from Mercer. So it went... Scientist, military, thinker, man of action. I remember the first time we actually saw, and Heller wasn't even the name we had, the concept art of what is now Heller. Right away, it was like, oh man, look at the guy's eyes. Look at the strength in his form. He's clearly military, strong. But his face and his eyes had such expression. You could see that directness, that fierceness, but you could see the loss. Oh my fucking god.
That is the shit.
And of course, people around us would say, oh, you chose an African American. No, we chose Heller. Can I just say, that is so beautifully PC from a company whose game is about being a psychotic killing machine who gains sustenance from eating corpses. But either way, offensive or not, however you feel about him, in my eyes, James Heller's characterization is plain lame and flat and tries way too hard, just like Alex Mercer, but a disappointment in his own special way. Second verse, same as the first. Luckily, after Prototype 2, all hope was not lost. There was still a light on the horizon. Surely, the upcoming release of the final installment in an epic modern-day trilogy would land on its feet and go out with a win. Oh no. I literally felt the cynicism growing inside of me on some Grinch Who Stole Christmas shit as I was playing through Assassin's Creed 3. There are a few interesting moments scattered throughout the something hours long campaign, but the lack of fucks is palpable when it comes to anything between the big story beats. The game begins with you climbing up some stuff, stabbing some people, doing some general assassin shit. You spend about 3 hours with this guy, Haytham, who is a generally acceptable character. He's no Ezio, but it's not hard to accommodate to his more by-the-book style and charm. So you spend 3 or 4 hours getting comfortable on this rug with Haytham, and then they rip that shit right out from under you.
Together, we will usher in the dawn of a new world, one defined by purpose and order. Give me your hand. You are a Templar. May the Father of Understanding guide us.
Haytham's a Templar? I'm a Templar? Big moment. Dope shit. And then you're immediately hauled off to play hide and seek with a bunch of 12-year-old Native Americans for 45 minutes. No, wait, go back to the interesting character. This guy's as charming as a sack of hammers. Which is to say, not charming at all. He's just there. He's just a sack of hammers. The story does not get more interesting from there, as the only thing the audience has to look forward to is counting how many ways Connor can dramatically rephrase, "Where's Charles Lee?" and how much of a dick he'll be to his mystical magical mansion dad in the next cutscene.
And why should I give you any credit?
The gameplay didn't fare any better. I was initially really excited because now you can run on trees. But then again, you can't, because it's shit. It's just shit. I think part of the problem was how perfectly cut the entirety of nature was for tree running. Shit was weird. God made these trees just for you, Connor. But you can only go this one way, so don't think about it too much. By this point, pretty much everybody was realizing that the parkour in these games feels stickier than a mouthful of peanut butter, as well as the fact that a stealth game without a manual crouch button is like playing an FPS game without a button to shoot your fucking gun. So I think Assassin's Creed 3 was kind of always destined for failure, especially after having to follow up the Ezio games. For me, the third entry can be pinpointed as the exact moment when I stopped giving a shit about this once promising series. Good job, Assassin's Creed 3. You fucking killed the whole thing. It enrages me to think about. I waited years for that. I can't stand to talk about it any longer.
I'm Steeb, and I can't say top 10 gaming disappointments with a straight face. Here's Dark Souls 2. You know what H-Bomber Guy doesn't point out in his epic rebuttal to Dark Souls 2 haters? The fact that the game feels like mud. Basic movement in Dark Souls 2 feels awful. The way the character walks, sprints, jumps, and rolls has little to no impact whatsoever. Attacks are decent, but the sound made for a hit landed is absolutely disgusting, and it does not evoke satisfaction on the visceral level of Dark Souls proper. Invincibility frames on rolling were allocated to a stat, making the basic essential damage avoiding move only work 50% of the time. And that's flippin' golly, I get roll clipped constantly. I get clipped in the middle of a roll, lose a third of my health, and my character doesn't even flinch. That's awful game feel. I'm not upset that I took damage in the middle of a roll, even though that is something to be salty about. I'm upset that my character doesn't seem to care. Dark Souls 2 was going for a theme of decay, but that only made the game look, sound, and play like mud. The textures look disgusting, the sound effects are less than stellar, and the lighting is unfinished due to the cut and reduced torch mechanic. It's not particularly pleasant on my eyeballs. You see, it's not aesthetically pleasing. Dark Souls 2 gives no good weapons until 75% of the way through the game, forcing me to play Fire Longsword when before players had many options to deck themselves out from Firelink Shrine, including a two-hander, the glorious halberd, the infinitely stable and reliable claymore, an S-stock, and that one shield by the undead dragon. Dark Souls 2 de-incentivizes shields by giving the player no 100% block shields until later on, but honestly, that's not a great, clear way to tell players to try a new strategy. Having to teleport back to a central hub, and this is a big one. Having to teleport back to a central hub, suffering through a loading screen, talking to some woman in order to level up before teleporting and loading back to the desired location is an objective downgrade to something Dark Souls 1 fixed from Demon's Souls. Leveling up at bonfires saved cumulative minutes, hours, days even, and for 2 to come back to it, and for 3 to look at 1 and 2 and choose 2 system is downright silly. From has wasted hours of gamers' lives with this mechanic. This is quite literally hurting our society by wasting our time. Ban all loading screens, but until all loading screens get banned, avoid needing them so much. I hate the HUD in this game, too. Just Dark Souls 1's bars were like thick and laden with irregular notches for players to precisely measure exactly how much health and stamina they had, lost, or recovered. And it made players feel like they had some degree of control and agency in this outrageously large world. Dark Souls 2's bars are grossly incandescent and the stamina bar is thin as a twig, and I don't appreciate it on an aesthetic or a functional level. The bar itself seems to deplete really fast, but honestly that might just be because of the endurance split and the bar being tiny. It doesn't feel great, man. Dark Souls 2 had low expectations, but I was still disappointed. Put on the picture, Barry. I expected nothing and I was still disappointed. Hating on Dark Souls 2.
We're about to get obscure up in this bitch. Marvel Nemesis Rise of the Imperfects is a game just as odd as its name. It's a gritty, third-person Marvel superhero brawler, where half of the cast is a bunch of crazy-ass superheroes and villains created specifically for this game. Some of these characters include people with names like Hazmat, Johnny Ohm, and Fault Zone. God, these names are so on the nose that it hurts. But I suppose when you get down to it, all superhero names are objectively ridiculous. The only reason we don't think Batman sounds stupid as shit is because we've grown up with the character. So, kudos for trying something new, I guess. I don't know who the fuck greenlit this weird-ass idea, but I want to shake their hand. That is, if their boss didn't chop off their hands after this game failed miserably. I seem to be one of the chosen few who was gifted with some sort of awareness of this out-there-as-fuck game, and as a kid, I completely loved it. So when the sequel came out, oh, it's canceled. Marvel Nemesis never got a follow-up, but what was promised from that canceled sequel sounded dope as hell. It was supposed to be a third-person action game like Marvel Nemesis, albeit featuring a more traditional third-person camera that follows your character around, and was slated to feature fully destructible stages that would crumble around you as you fought to the finish. It's an awesome idea that I feel like Marvel really needs to jump on to compete with Injustice, but it's never gonna happen. Which is a tragedy, because I think a modern day Marvel Nemesis could rock everybody's fucking socks off. So yeah, there's not much to say about this one other than it never happened. I guess we'll go to the next one then.
Maybe we'll meet again, under better circumstances.
Playing Fallout 4 is like buying a really expensive Lamborghini and popping the hood to take a look at the engine, only to instead find a small man with some spark plugs and 2 holes cut in the bottom of the frame for his little feet instead of an actual fucking engine. Get a new engine, Bethesda! Fallout 4 is unique in that it has been a constant fountain of disappointment for years at this point. Sure, the game itself is a hollow husk of its previous iterations, but then came the disappointing and overpriced DLC, followed up by the more recent and more egregious Creation Club. This game has been on the shelves for 2 years, and they're still finding new ways to fuck it up! Way to innovate, Bethesda! If I could sum up the failings in one quick sentence, I think it would have to be... it sucks. Simple as that. Fallout 4 just sucks. The characters are bland, the vast majority of the quests are bereft of any creativity or personality, the grind of settlement management makes me want to go do my fucking taxes instead, and the world is an empty shell of what it could have been. Last time we explored the world of Fallout, it was so unique and interesting and charming, which is the main reason why it's baffling to me how boring and repetitive this game becomes after like 5 hours. There's so much potential here, but it's squandered by what I can only assume is a team of people that spent 7 years in a row getting shit-faced and suddenly realized 8 months before release that they had to make an actual fucking game. It's fucking infuriating, it really is. 8 years of waiting, 8 fucking years, and I can't fucking handle, I can't handle talking about this piece of shit.
Wow, I didn't think it'd come back so fast. Here's Halo 4. I think that's number 4 as well, right? Number 4, Halo 4? Cool. Halo 4 was the sequel that didn't need to happen. The revival to a series that definitively ended twice. Sequelitis is an epidemic. Franchises and brands remaking and rebooting themselves until they stop selling, living long enough to see themselves become the villains, and it really gives me a personal sense of dreadful existentialism sometimes. And that's the only problem I have with them. Halo 4 feels pretty good. Fighting the Covenant is pretty competently done, guns being given a quote photorealistic punch to them, making them explode in players' hands, and that's great. The game is still pushing the benchmark for graphics and pretty landscapes, and that's nice, right? My big criticism with the game is the Prometheans entirely. They don't look cool, they lack personality, and they don't feel great to fight. The sparks that come out of them when shot really don't clearly communicate their shields being reduced and popping, and they teleport randomly. The way they teleport has this futuristic delay to them, so you end up shooting into their empty teleportation animation, which contributes to Halo 4's ammo famine, and it stinks. They're all robots and orange and painful to look at, and I don't like them. Their guns kinda suck too, compared to the old reliables and the return of the glorious battle rifle. And, you know, scripted sequences, focus on story that isn't charming or cool, terrible final boss, you know. But what makes Halo 4 a real top 10 disappointment is that I used to have this best friend by the name of... We met IRL before he moved away to Colorado, and we connected through Call of Duty, Halo, and Xbox Live for years. We were inseparable, sharing countless laughs and infinite hype. It was a glorious time for chilling with my buds after getting all my homework done and winding down with some seizure-inducingly twitchy shooters with my best friends. But on the internet, I'm hearing some whispers of dead franchises, of poor business practices, and another life entirely. I grew restless of buying yearly $60 games on my mom's cumulative allowance and $60 more for yearly Xbox Live subscriptions just so I could talk to my friend and play games together. I started to grow out of it. Halo 4 felt disgusting to me somehow. So I made the decision within myself to stop paying for Xbox Live and stop buying $60 shooters the moment they come out. Simply put, that means I didn't get to talk to my friend anymore outside of a one-on-one private chat, and really he didn't do that, he'd prefer to be in a party, you know? We couldn't play together since he was playing all the newer games, so we drifted apart naturally. I became a patrician with standards and taste, scoffing at the newest, shiniest game merely on the fact that it was, in fact, new. While my stepbrother brought in Halo 4 for game nights with his buds, I sat sadly in the corner hearing them laugh and shout and have fun. What was I doing? Playing Pokemon in the corner? This sucks. Halo 4 marks the end of my adolescence and the end of a glorious friendship. Hang on. I gotta find a good Halo quote here. Don't make a girl a promise you can't keep.
Sorry, man, it's okay. It's alright. Oh, is it back to me? There were some fucking shenanigans going down at Turtle Rock Studios. Fucking shenanigans abound. They should have just called this game Shenanigans. Why the fuck do I need to sign all these documents and shit? I feel like I'm applying for a loan. Okay, well, I'm reasonably sure that someone somewhere at Turtle Rock now owns the deed to my house. So after signing what feels like a fucking prenup, you finally get to play the game. And let me tell you, soon enough you're gonna wish you were back at that stack of virtual paperwork. As I'm sure most of you know, Evolve arrived on the gaming scene to a resounding... That's it. The mechanics were repetitive, the characters and monsters didn't provide good feedback, so it played like Play-Doh, and as soon as you stepped into the main menu, the game started propositioning you with despicable microtransactions. And yet, at the time, me and my boy Jacob ate that shit up like hotcakes. One of my great shames in life is the episode of Gaming Scadventures where we first played Evolve. That shit is like a perfect time capsule of denial. My brain fucking short-circuited, and by the end of the video, I give Evolve 4 out of 5 stars, despite the video being filled with terrible glitches. I literally couldn't accept that this game was shit for weeks, because I just I just wanted something good. Why isn't anything good? I had been waiting for this game. I had been hyped as shit for this game ever since its initial reveal on the cover of Game Informer. War of the Monsters plus Team Fortress or some shit. What could go wrong? Everything. Apparently. Evolve was a disappointment of Herculean proportions. It takes effort to fuck up a game that bad, and fuck it up they certainly did. Yet another game slain in the wake of microtransactions. Ah yes, Arkham Knight. Produced by WB, creators of such admirable products as the Shadow of War Market and the Oscar award-winning Suicide Squad.
You want no beef? You don't want no beef? You don't want no beef?
WB, ruiner of all things good and pure in the world. Despite Arkham Knight being the most gorgeous game in the whole fucking... Oh my god, this game is so fucking hot. Oh my god, I gotta take off my shirt. I'm getting so hot. It is a true goddamn disappointment. The game itself isn't as egregious as some of the others on the list. It's not a flaming fucking garbage fire like Assassin's Creed 3 or Revolve, but it was a tragedy to see my main man Bat Guy get crushed under the steamroller of microtransactions. The game was effectively cut into little tiny morsels and fed to me over the course of months. That's not what I want in a Batman game. I don't want to feel like Batman's prisoner of war, like Frank Miller's Robin locked in the Batcave eating rats and shit. God, what are you, Frank Miller? The main story of Arkham Knight itself is a pretty solid send-off to this iteration of Batman, framing his extreme Snyder-esque avoidance of any and all normal human relationships as an actual problem for once, and a problem with an actual solution by the game's end. Bruce is ready to retire at the end of that game, at least in my eyes, and I think the execution of the build-up to that ending was quite well done. But besides that, everything is a downgrade from City and Asylum. The stealth feels simpler and somehow less satisfying than previous iterations. The combat has lost its edge, and we all know how you feel about the Batmobile. I personally don't hate it, but I do hate that its inclusion was built in as the third pillar of gameplay next to stealth and combat, because using that fucking Warmobile isn't nearly as compelling as either of those other aspects of gameplay. After a certain point, I kinda just expected every villain to come to battle equipped with a tank or vehicle of some sort. Arkham Knight has his overcompensation mobile, Deathstroke has a tank that he just won't get out of. 12 hours into this game, I was half expecting the Killer Crocmobile or the Freeze Burghini to show up. Arkham Knight isn't a terrible game. In the end, I don't really even consider it a bad game. It's a mediocre game. A gorgeous mediocre game, but mediocre nonetheless. And when you're following up two of the most well-received third-person action games of the 21st century, mediocre just isn't enough. Years ago, a fateful demo quietly dropped onto the PSN during E3 2014. It was a horror game, but also it wasn't. It was too small, but it was an exhilarating experience. One of my all-time favorite spooky gaming moments appears in this demo. I just want to let it play out for you real quick. Fucking chills every time. No loud ass jump scare music. The monster doesn't fucking jump right out at your face. You just gotta muster up your courage and walk into that darkness. But there was a secret hidden inside this obtuse playable teaser. If you so happened to hear a phone ring, and then took 2 steps forward, and then waited 10 seconds, and then stepped forward and waited for the phone to ring again, and then did a 360 twist and whispered seductively into your microphone, and then went to the left, and take it back now, y'all. One hop this time. Right foot. Oh my god. But one should never underestimate the meticulousness of gamers, as within a day, some random streamer managed to cha-cha slide their ass into the big reveal hidden inside this strange, unexpected demo. PT was actually a teaser for Silent Hills, a new entry in the monumental series being developed by 4 masters of their respective mediums. Can you fucking imagine what a game from Hideo Kojima, Guillermo del Toro, Junji Ito, and Norman Reedus would have looked like if fuck Konami hadn't cancelled it? I'll answer that for you. No, you can't. Because it would have melted your eyes out of your fucking head. That shit would have been like looking into the eyes of God. Maybe I'm putting this unreleased game up on a pedestal, but if PT is any indication as to what we would have received in Silent Hills, it had the potential to be one of my favorite games of all time. Shit, PT itself isn't really even a game in the classic sense, but it's easily one of the most visceral gaming experiences I've ever had in my life. I went in knowing nothing, and came out fucking shook. With the backing of the creative powerhouses that Silent Hills had behind it, I truly believe that the harrowing journey of Norman Reedus and his freaky fetus would have been a straight-up modern masterpiece. But corporate Japan just wasn't having it. A bunch of crusty, greedy old fucks canceled this game, and to this day, we still don't really even know why the bastards with the money did it. I still think about this game all the time. Like once a week, I feel this sharp pain in the empty hole in my chest that Silent Hills might have filled. Rest in peace, SH. Let us all press our preferred keys to pay our respects.